Good
Hey,
seeing you.
Jonathan. So I think for today, what I was thinking of is maybe you guys share your stories. Introduce yourself and share your stories first, and then share whatever big lessons that you thought helped you to transition from the veteran life to the tech with Microsoft or even before Microsoft. I don't know, if you want to share those things before Microsoft as well. And I had few questions. I'll maybe put those in the chat for you here. But again, I don't want this to be like a kind of a script. I'll just let you run your own show the way you want to share. So again, just questions like how would you introduce yourself when your old title no longer fits, for example. What's the one military skill that employers undervalue? What's the biggest limiting belief veterans or anyone pivoting careers carry, and how do you break it? Things like that. Again, I have a few questions to ask you, but again, it's just going to be for conversation starters. And once people will join, then if they have other questions, then I'll let you take those questions.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good to
Awesome.
me.
Awesome. And I see some folks already joined. Hey guys, so we're going to start in, let's say, 5 minutes. Oh, sorry, 3 minutes maybe. Let me just put this into together mood that we can see everybody. Let's choose this one this time maybe. And I'll spotlight you, Jonathan, and Dr. Barnabas is already spotlighted. So you
Sounds good.
guys always be on camera. Awesome. I'll give it maybe 2 more minutes and then we'll kick it off. How has your week been, Jonathan?
It was good. It was good. I went kayaking on the Shenandoah yesterday.
Oh,
That was
nice.
a first experience. So, been kayaking previously, but never on the Shenandoah. Yeah, good, good. Nice to feel like when you go out and do some different sort of exercise. Just the feeling. And plus, I mean, it was a beautiful day, nice and sunny. So, yeah, it was a nice time. So, what
Amazing.
about you? How's your weekend been?
Weekend was good. I met some friends yesterday, and we chit chat and laughed a little bit. So that was good. The weather is a little bit changing quickly. Like it was very very nice during the week. Yesterday it was hot. I don't know why. Suddenly in Ottawa here in Ontario, but overall I cannot complain. It's a beautiful summer still.
Yeah, for
Awesome.
sure.
And I'm
I
not sure
think that
if
I've
you.
been on a call with
Sorry, go ahead.
I've been on call previously with yeah, I've been on a call previously with Dr. Barnabas, but I don't think we've ever had a chance to kind of formally meet. So it'd be nice to hear kind of his experience and what that was like. So looking
Awesome.
forward to this.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah. Dr. Barnabas brings a ton of wisdom. He was my boss's boss during the time at Microsoft, and I definitely learned a lot from his leadership.
Too
Awesome.
kind. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I think let's kick it off. Let me start the recording. And okay, awesome. Happy Sunday, everybody. Glad to be here today. Beautiful weather in Ottawa, Ontario. I don't know where you are, but hopefully it's a beautiful weather too. And looking forward to an amazing discussion about veterans transitioning into tech. And today, I'm proud to be your host, Ahmed Zayed. I'm an IT professional and a professional and a career coach. I've been working with companies like Microsoft, Indeed, PwC, Cisco, and others. And I've now taken the role of helping people land jobs in 3 months or less through my company futurecareer.net, and I'm hosting this webinar almost since COVID 2020 with tons of people who are joining and hopefully learning and growing and finding some of the answers to their questions about their career, about their challenges, and how to land the best role that they dream of. So today I'm very, very proud to support this topic about transitioning from veterans to civilian life, specifically in tech. And today we have two great speakers, or two great panel guests, who is going to share their own story. I'm just gonna introduce the names and let them share a brief introduction about themselves. Dr. Barnabas Roundtree and Jonathan Tennis. Both are transitioning again previously from military to tech, and they both were my colleagues at Microsoft. I was very, very proud to work with Dr. Barnabas. I didn't work with Jonathan directly, but we were colleagues. We share the same values of helping community through almost 2-3 years now, and it's been a nice journey. Jonathan is a great friend of mine as well, and I'm very, very proud about this friendship too. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Barnabas to provide a quick intro, and then Jonathan, and then we'll kick it off with your stories and see how this will take us on. Dr. Barnabas, please go ahead.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Happy to have this conversation in this topic. I know how I think back probably about 14 years now, 15 years now, when I made the transition, separating from the Air Force, and thinking about what it was I wanted to do and how I wanted to go about doing that, and just that that fear. To be quite honest, that paralysis, that wondering if I was ever going to be able to make that transition and make that leap, and really thinking about what skill sets I would bring, what applicable skill sets, I said it that way, what applicable skill sets I would bring from the military into this civilian world, if you will, and how those things would work for me, and how I would land those things and continue to grow and continue my career. So looking forward to providing some answers to those as we get into a little bit more storytelling a little bit later on. But I also want to make sure that from my perspective, I want this to be as interactive as possible. We have a small audience right now, so I'd love the opportunity to make sure that we're going back and forth and we're sharing, and we're actually answering the questions that you want to have answered, right? Because that's the productive part to us, is making sure that you get what you need from this conversation, not necessarily just us sitting up here pontificating about things that have happened to us in our lives. So with that said, please don't hesitate to raise your hand. Don't hesitate to interrupt and ask questions as we go along, so that we can make it as interactive as possible. So looking forward to the conversation. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thanks, sir. So I served 5 years in the Army, transitioned back in 2003. And anybody who knows anything about what the military experience is like, you basically grow up. You become an adult in the military. And so for a lot of folks, whether they serve 5 years or 25 years, that transition and that sort of change, that massive change to your life, to your lifestyle, is going to happen. But I think that the same things that I learned in transition, and I think that I'm still transitioning in those past 20 years, are applicable to anybody who's in the job market, right? That comes from, hey, like all of a sudden I need to pivot to this, or I need to adapt. I think the military helped me a lot, but that's not to say that civilians, don't have those skills as well. And what I like about the transition space is talking to folks about, hey, it is scary. One of the things that Barnabas mentioned, I appreciate you bringing it up, is, it is scary. It's okay to be afraid. Our livelihoods are at stake, our ability to remain housed and fed and cared for, and our families. All of those things, our sense of worth in society are really often closely tied to our work. And so all of a sudden not having a job, what does that mean? That's where do you take your skills? What do you do? Do you want to still do that? I was fortunate. I was an intelligence professional in the Army. And so it was easier, I would say, to transition. But it's still hard. You still got to make those decisions about where you want to be and what you want to do. So happy to, yes, continue while we have a small audience, please do. And throughout this, if there are questions that come up, I think that whether or not you serve, that doesn't matter to this conversation. What matters to this conversation, honestly, is, what are the things that you can do to set yourself up for success? Because the idea of adapting and overcoming, the idea of not failing, the idea of accomplishing the mission, those are all things that are military, but those are also things in the civilian world as well. Thank you for having me, Ahmed.
Oh, thank you so much for being here today, both Dr. Barnabas and Jonathan. So let's maybe start with your stories. If you want to share, a little bit of background, where you're coming from, and just to give the folks the context of how this affected your future or affected your current position, in tech. So if you maybe Dr. Barnabas, if you want to take us through your story, and then we'll pass it on to Jonathan as well.
Sure. Way back when, I guess that's how the story starts. I won't go back that far. I'm just kidding. In all honesty, though, my Air Force career started. I graduated from college, went into the Air Force as a electrical and environmental systems specialist. I don't know if you know what that means, but it's actually an electrician on an aircraft. So I worked on C-130 gunships down at Herbert Field. I did that for about 2 years. My dream going into the Air Force was to fly. I wanted to be a pilot. Went in, kind of got recruited, misled during the recruiting process. So I wound up working on the aircraft, not actually flying the aircraft. That was my fault. But once I got in, had the opportunity to transition over to become an officer. Went through that process and did that. Looked at trying to be a pilot a little bit more, and then realized that I was colorblind. I couldn't see the colors that I needed to see to be a pilot. So I went on to do other things. I became an acquisition officer after I transitioned over as an officer. I did acquisitions for about 4 years. I enjoyed it. It was fun. I learned a lot, but decided I wanted to go do some other things. So I went and did HR, and I kind of morphed into different careers while I was inside of the Air Force. I had the opportunity to do a variety of things. I stayed about 14 years, ultimately my career culminating over in USAFE. I was stationed in Germany at Ramstein Air Base, working on the Commander's Action Group, which is the CAG, working for the 4-star general over there at the time as part of his action team that helped him write speeches, prepare for diplomatic visits. So traveled a lot. I had the opportunity to travel a lot with some very senior people and be in some very senior meetings before I decided it was time for me to separate and go do something else. Now, you'll notice all those things I said had nothing to do with IT, right? I'd never thought about IT. That was the furthest thing from my mind, to be quite honest. Actually, I couldn't say it was the furthest thing from my mind because I wasn't thinking about it at all. What happened for me was in the Commander's Action Group, we were going through a process in the Air Force where we were implementing a tool that was a CRM-based tool, a customer relationship management-based tool that would help us do taskers. So we were having a tasker problem. We couldn't control our taskers. We couldn't figure out where they were. So this company came in to help us do that. I became a power user on that system, really good at it. And it just kind of worked for me, and I understood how it worked and then what we needed to do. So when that company found out that I was separating from the military, they asked me would I come work for them. And I was like, but I'm not IT. Work for you doing what? And they said, no. We don't need you to be technical. We don't need you to be IT. What we actually need you to do is help us translate the language of military into a language that we understand so that our developers can help continue to code and do the things that we needed to do to make the product more viable. So that was my foray into IT, right? I said, sure, I'll do it. I didn't have anything else I was doing at the time. I said, sure, I'll do it. Did that for a little bit. That turned into not only that translation, but the meetings that I started attending, the opportunities to start becoming a trainer. I started writing scripts for training. I started doing all of the little things that built the knowledge and the muscle memory and everything that I would need to do to eventually get totally into IT. But that's how it started for me, right? So it doesn't have to be a journey where you make that quick connection across and it makes sense to you right away. It can be a progressive thing where you end up doing all of these things. And then ultimately what I understood was there was a lot of skills that I had that were needed in the IT community because that was skill sets that they didn't have. So if you take the career progression path of a person that graduates from high school, goes and gets some certifications, then it goes directly into tech, they're super smart in the technical aspect of what it is they do, the day-to-day of what that is. But there are other things, the leadership skills, the training skills, all of the foundational framework around being able to complete projects in a specific way. All of those things are things that they may or may not have, right? They may or may not have that discipline that they need to have to make those things happen. So there's a lot of skill sets that are soft skills or unspoken skills, if you will, or power skills, if you will, that we bring from the military community that are definitely needed inside of civilian life and civilian applications. They call them different things. They look at them a very different way. I will say that I think sometimes that being military kind of puts a different spotlight on you as, being a very rigid person, a very, a person who's very disciplined, but disciplined in a way that sometimes they push back on, right? So being able to understand those nuances and what that actually means and how to leverage that and how to do it become very critical in your career and career growth and trajectory as you continue to move forward in that. But I think they're all great skill sets to have. I use my military training, to be quite honest, every day in everything that I do. It's a foundational thing. It's part of me now. It's a foundational thing in what I do. And I've learned how to, I would say, not necessarily control it, but I've learned how to apply it, I guess is a better way to say it. I've learned how to apply it in a way that doesn't put people off or give them any indication that I'm trying to be, their CEO or anything like that, right? It's just more around, okay, hey, what about this and what about that? And asking the questions and starting to lay the vigor. And they come to respect that and they come to want it, right? They come to say, hey, look, let's go talk to Barnabas about this because he thinks a very different way about how we think. And I think that's the key thing, right? The military training makes you think very differently than civilians think, right? Because you go through a process as it relates to how you get to the answer that you're going to get to differently, not better or worse, just differently than how they may go through that process. So having the ability to listen, having the ability to communicate and translate that, oh, I understand what you're saying, but what about this? I think is a critical thing to have, and a critical thing to understand that you bring to the table as it relates to your process, to your development and the process growth that you have. So I'll end there and see if there's any questions. One, if there are, I answer those. If not, I'll pass that over to Jonathan.
Amazing. This is amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Barnabas. Jonathan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my stories, I think if you talk to any veteran, their stories, are different for how they joined, where they joined, why they joined. I ended up failing out of college and sort of was directionless in my life. Didn't know what I wanted to do. Was sort of like knew I needed to grow up. Knew I had the smarts, just couldn't figure out where and how to apply those. So joined the Army because it was an opportunity for me to go and do something, right? I ended up in 2 years of schooling where they trained me to be a linguist and then had an opportunity to deploy. One of the things that you get a lot of opportunities to do, I was playing putt-putt as a part of a social activity recently with a group of people. It was, just a way for us to share, get to know each other, talk, through, and they were like, you live a very interesting life. I think the military gives you an opportunity to go and see and do things that a lot of civilians never have an opportunity. Like I've spent a lot of time overseas. I've done some really cool missions. But I never thought I'd work for Microsoft. That was never even, I've spent a lifetime in defense contracting, consulting work. After I got out of the service, I transitioned because it was a natural, easy transition. I became an intelligence professional working for one of the big Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, these big firms that you see if you live around the DC area. Everybody's heard of them, right? They make weapon systems, they build boats. They also do a lot of augmentation of our military, a lot of support for our military, where the military may not have that because it takes years to train. And Barnabas and I know this from our time in the service. If the military wants something in 10 years, we need to be executing on it today. There needs to be a plan in place because we got to ask for the money. We got to know what we're asking for, right? All that has to be approved. So the military moves. The big military moves pretty slow because, we're talking about, we're doing forecasting for what 28, 29, 30, 31 budgets are. What are we going to need for national security? And that's a big thing, right? What boats are we going to need? What ships are we going to need? What planes are we going to need? What will our total force structure need? Who there are a lot of threats in the world, and we're not going to turn this into a national security discussion, but, all of those things are things that we have to plan for. And at 21, 22, 23, to be thinking about these things, to be planning for these things, to be like, hey, when I went to Iraq, I had to plan for bringing a group of young men and women into a country, having limited resources. So we were in an environment where, the internet that we brought with us. We had a satellite dish on a trailer that we brought with us, right? The water, we had to haul that in too. The food that we had to haul that in. And so when you then think about how far ahead of your supply train can you get, right? Because if you get too far ahead and you run out of gas, well, guess what? you're going to be sitting there for a while because nothing will make you feel like, and you run out of water. Well, I hope you don't get thirsty. Running out of water in the desert's a really bad place to run out of water. So it helps make me become a planner, right? I'm now a planner for everything. I have a plan, I have a backup plan, I have a backup plan to the backup plan, because that's the way that I sort of, my brain works now. What's interesting about my journey into Microsoft, because and it is the pinnacle of IT. As far as IT is concerned, sometimes I'll joke with people. I used to work for a small to medium sized tech firm. I don't know if you've heard of them. It's called Microsoft. It was something that came about just as a result of a recruiter finding me a resume, right? And I recognize how fortunate I am that I never applied for a single job at Microsoft until a recruiter reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I found your resume. Would love to talk to you about a role." And that's awesome. That's amazing, right? Given that people apply for thousands of jobs there and never get a single call back. So I recognize how fortunate I am to have had that happen. And I'm grateful for the things that I was able to see and do in that, because Microsoft is, one of the things Microsoft has that I really enjoyed, that I didn't sort of expect to see at an IT company is an affinity group or an employee resource group where, I'm grateful for my service. I will take the free haircut and I'll take the free donut. On Veterans Day, I love that people thank me for my service. That's not why I joined. I didn't even join for the GI Bill, honestly. The reason I joined is I knew myself well enough to know I needed to grow up. GI Bill's been great, right? I got 2 graduate degrees out of it. So I am absolutely the beneficiary of, I am so grateful for the education benefits and grateful for what the military allowed me to do, right? Because it helped me grow up and become the person I am today. Barnabas mentioned something about every single day thinking about that military experience and what that military experience brought to me. And I 100%, I am the immensely grateful beneficiary of having been able to volunteer to serve this country, having been able to do the things that I was able to do, because it set me up on a path for a life that I don't think I would have had otherwise. Sure, I could have gone to college. Sure, there were other ways into the intelligence industry, but it gave me years of experience. I walked out of the military with 5 years experience. And when I then put on my resume, I'm like, whereas, college graduates today are like, they're going to apply for a job and they're like, "Do you have any experience?" No, I don't. I've got real, true, tried and true experience that I could show. Hey, I could hold up a resume and say, "This is what I've done." And I was in the community too. I think that's one thing that I again, when I talk about the military, I talk about the military experience for me and what it's like to live as a veteran. But I don't think that this is solely unique to, because community is hugely important. I think that we don't talk about that enough in the transition space, and how important it is to rely on and leverage your community, because we're not in a space where you just apply for a job and then somebody's going to call you back and you're going to get that job. That's just, if it happens, great. I think count your blessings, thank your gods, recognize, how lucky you are, because it's now about, I'm reaching back and talking to people, my military network. I haven't seen them in 20 years maybe, but because of those bonds, because of the things we've been through, they're so strong that I can go back to somebody and be like, "Hey, can you pass my resume around this? Do you know anybody who's," because you want to be able to leverage those networks, because there's limitation to the number of people I have a direct relationship with, right? But if I then go, "Hey, who's in my network?" Maybe you've got somebody who's got, an amazing network in the defense space, or in there are companies I haven't been able to break into. And I know this is being recorded. I'm happy to share. One of those, where was I? OpenAI. I don't have a lot of connections at OpenAI. And so a friend of mine posted a job, or a friend of mine reacted to a job posting recently that was for a customer success person at OpenAI. I read the job description. It was in the pub sector space, which is what I work in. That's one of the other ways we talk about the national security space or the government space. We call it a variety of different things. Some call it federal, some call it pub sector, some just say NatSec. But at the end of the day, it was a job description. I read through it, the whole thing, both the preferred, both the required and the preferred qualifications. And I thought, this is a job I can do. So I immediately go to my LinkedIn and I'm like, who do I know at OpenAI? Turns out somebody I had a decent relationship with over at AWS that I was working to network with is now over there. And so I reached out and pinged him. I said, "Hey, is there anything you could do to help?" Again, I'm not asking anybody to go stand before God and country and say, "This is the best person that I've ever seen." But if if somebody's willing to put their thumb on the scale a little bit and help, help make sure that you can get from that big pile to that little pile, help just have a manager take more than a 10-second glance at your resume, I'm willing to ask that. And I recognize it's an ask, and that's important too. Is that there's some people who I don't have the relationship with, where I'm like, hey, can I get the referral? Hey, and that's something where this current job search, because I've been laid off since January, this current job search has really helped me better understand is where are the gaps in my network. And I think that that's something that when I coach and mentor now, I'll say, do an examination of that. I talked to somebody. I went back to Microsoft this week for an event. And it was about AI, and it was great. We're walking around talking. It's a space. The office is a block and a half from my house, so it's an office that I spend a lot of time in. So, sort of a reunion, sort of a homecoming for me, right? And I'm walking around, and I mentioned to somebody, who worked in a different sector, and we had volunteered on some different projects together that had been laid off. And he's like, I didn't know, and I was like, yeah. It turns out they don't announce to the other 200,000 people at Microsoft that Jonathan is no longer with us. It's okay. I'm okay with that, right? But I said, it's nice to be walking around, and we're just sort of chatting, and I was talking about dusting off my resume, and he turned to me, he was like, I haven't updated my resume in 7 years. Like, you got to do that, man. And I'm not saying that because I'm hoping that you're going to get laid off, and so you'll be able to join me in this fight, right? For the next role. Sometimes it feels a little Hunger Games-ish, right? So it's like, you're like, but you got to have that resume updated, and you got to network for when you need it, and when you're, and so when I talk to folks, it's like, I've been networking a lot. And for the last 3 years that I was at Microsoft, I networked a ton. And I'm now reaping the benefits of that, because now people know. I have people who are doing my job search for me. Not in the sense that like I went and tasked them with that, but I have put out to my network, hey, I'm looking for a role. These are the types of roles I'm looking for. This is the sector. This is the region of the country I want to work in. And people will send me job descriptions. Are every single one of them a perfect match? No, absolutely not. But that's that part about keeping your resume updated, making sure that your network is fresh. And then I'm a terrible gardener. So if you know anything about me personally, you'd be like, you can't grow anything. Like, I could kill any plant. I could kill a plastic plant. I mean, really, I'm just that bad at gardening. But I treat my network a whole lot better than I treat my gardening skills, right? And you nurture that. You nurture your network. You keep your network fresh. You make sure that, like, when I was saying a minute ago, I have gaps in my network that I've identified as a result of OpenAI. Now, there's not a ton of employees at OpenAI yet. It's a relatively new company. But I've identified places where I can go and then talk to my network, talk to that core group of people and say, hey, Ahmed, I haven't looked at your network to see who you know at OpenAI, but you're somebody who I would look at and go like, hey, I wonder who he knows over at OpenAI. Maybe he can make an introduction. Maybe I can become pals with, because that's where you start spreading. That's where that spider web of networking really pays off. It's not about just that person, that one connection. It's about who that one connection could potentially connect you to, and not in a transactional sense, not in a, hey, I want to be friends with you just so that I can have access to your network. But at the end of the day, anybody who knows networking, anybody who understands this market, understands that. And when I send open to work connections, or when I send connection requests to folks, I say, hey, I want to connect with you for how my network will benefit from having you in it, but also how you could potentially benefit from having me in your network, and what those shared networks will then do. Because I want to make sure it's mutually beneficial. I want to make sure that people understand that I'm asking you for something. I'm asking you to connect because I want you in my network, because I want to have access to your network. But I also want to make sure that you're understanding that I will make sure that I'm offering my network. I'm coming into this with something else. It's not just constantly me asking for something. And those are great things that I learned about myself in my short period of time in the military. But also ever since, rely on your network, find your tribe, get your community.
It's no different than in the military. Thanks, Jonathan, because you said a couple of things that sparked things with me. The networking thing is no different than what we do in the military, right? As far as, I know somebody over supply, I know somebody over in whatever, right? Whatever part of I know somebody over the hospital. I can get an appointment when nobody else can get an appointment. It's the same concept. And the key thing about that concept is knowing that you're going to be called on at some point in time. You're not always going to be the one asking. Sometimes you're going to be the one asked, right? So it's that reciprocation of being able to do those things as you go through that process that makes it work. The biggest thing I'll say for me in this whole journey and understanding of what it is that you have to spend a lot of time with yourself, reflecting. And I know Ahmed's going to look at this and start smiling, because he and I have these conversations a couple of times a week. But being able to really discern what it is you want is super critical. Jonathan, you made the point about OpenAI and going to the network and asking. The question is, what are you asking for, right? Because when you go to these people and you're saying, hey, I need your help. Okay, help with what? I need a job. Okay, what does that mean? I need a job doing this. Okay, but there's tons of those. What does that mean? So doing that self-reflection and really nailing down and working with people like Ahmad and Samir and those type of folks to really help you start to get to, the 500-foot level of what it is you're trying to accomplish and what it is you really want to do makes that network be able to help you a lot easier than you just coming in at the 20,000-foot level and saying, I'm looking for a job in IT. I can't do anything with that, right? But if you're telling me I'm looking for a job in IT at OpenAI doing this particular thing, here's an example of a job rec that I saw that I might, that resonates with me, that's a lot different. And then that gets those people working on your behalf and sending you things that are very similar to that. And it helps narrow your search down, and it makes it a lot less overwhelming. I know we all read the stories on LinkedIn, and to be honest with you, I try to stay off LinkedIn as much as I can because it can get kind of depressing when you're looking at people saying I sent in 30,000 applications and I didn't get one response. It's like, okay, well, are you just clicking the button, right? Is that what you're doing and you're thinking you're applying? Or are you really going through the process of looking at those job recs and really discerning whether or not you can do that job? That's part of what it is, right? I see stuff all the time and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But when I really look at it and really break it down, I say, I don't have the skill set to do that. Not that doesn't mean that I won't apply, right? I'm just being honest with myself about, okay, here are the deficiencies in my abilities that I probably need to look at. And I'll say this last thing too. One of the things I've realized is that in this market where you have so many people available to work, probably is a difficult time to start trying to do something that you've never done unless you're going to back that up with other things, right? So you're going to have a plan about, okay, I need to fill in these gaps before I go try to do that particular thing. Nobody's going to, say this the right way. The likelihood of somebody hiring you to do something that you've never done when there's a pool of people that have done that are still looking for work is slim. Right? So understanding what those odds are as you pull your search together makes it a lot easier for you. And that's what we're trying to do is like, what makes it easier for you to do as you go through the process? And those are tips and tricks and things that, I've gathered as I've gone along my journey as well. So definitely willing to share.
I love it. This is amazing. And I love those, discussions and those wisdom that you guys are sharing and letting everybody live your world, despite, again, how you pivoted, how you moved, this is all about pivoting. This is all about flexibility. This is all about adaptability. How do you really manage the situation that you're facing in this life? So, and I want this to be more of, interaction and more of a discussion like it is already. And maybe I'll ask you a few questions to see how this could help even those who are not veterans moving to civilian. Again, the general thought of mind of transitioning, transferable skills, how to get to the other side. So one of the things that I would maybe ask you, what is the one skill that employers undervalue? And that this is very, very, very powerful thing that I've learned, again, from my previous life. And how can I position this to my next employer? Again, how to use your transferable skills in order to be an asset, a segue for your next job. And again, this is where most people are sometimes stuck on how can I translate this to that. And I'll pause here, see if Jonathan or Dr. Barnabas want to take a stab here.
I think that when you have these conversations of skills, right, and these, the transferability of, I think that if you've been on any of these calls, if you know me for a little while, I love memes. And, one of the memes that I was looking at the other day said, where do you, it was an interview scene, right? And the scene is set and it's like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the response is like, I'm not really good at listening, right? But it's done a lot funnier because the idea of answering these questions, these polished, perfect, I think one of the things that I've shared in here is tell me about a time when you failed. And people are like, well, I've never failed anything. And so that's actually a really terrible response. And because if you come to the, perspective of, you come at an interview, and the thing that you tell me, it's going to cause me, if I'm the interviewer, and I've done prep work for interviews, if I'm sitting there as the interviewer and I'm at a company and I'm wanting you to join my team, and you tell me you've never failed at anything, I don't think that I'm going to start to question anything else that you've said to me, right? Because if you're not willing to embrace that failure. And so one of the things that I have that came from the military that I take with me every single day, and I'd already had it, obviously. Clearly, I've got lots of examples of failure in my life, but I think it's that ability to frankly own it. I have never framed a single one of my degrees. I don't need to. I have them on my resume. I've got the transcripts. If somebody wants me to send them to them, you can see that I got an A in this and a B in that. To me, I don't want those up in my house. But something that I do have framed is the academic report that I failed out of the University of Georgia with a 0.9 GPA, because I want to see every single day that is what failure looks like, right? 0.9 is a lot. You really have to try to get that low. But what's beautiful about that is that shows me that I have the ability, and I'm tying this back to the military and in general, I own that failure, right? I am the one who's responsible for that. That's not because my teachers didn't like me. That's not because they didn't like guys who had the last name of tennis. That was because I didn't show up. I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And sometimes you fail when you do all the right things. But what life is about to me and what I learned in the military and what I carry forward every single day is, you can knock me off the horse. You can kick me down. I will fail day after day after day, but I'm getting back up. I'm going to get back up. As long as I have air in my lungs, I'm going to get back up. I'm going to continue to fight. And that is something that I think that I saw before. I experienced that failure before the military. I learned this skill in the military. And that is huge, because I have seen people who aren't able to experience that. And I don't say I experience it with grace and dignity. I'm not saying that I don't, as a man in his late 40s, sometimes have a pity party and sit on the floor and pound my fists. But then I get, I clean myself up again. I sort of do, but I keep going. And that's something I think that is huge in this process, especially because, as Barnabas mentioned, it's hard to be on LinkedIn right now, because sometimes it feels a little bit like Facebook, because people are bashing recruiters, and the recruiters are getting on and they're bashing candidates. And then everybody's sitting there talking bad about each other. And I'm like, Jesus, if I wanted this, I'd go to Facebook, right? It's hard to, as a human being who considers themselves somewhat empathetic and somewhat sympathetic, to look and see somebody has applied for, sit here and say, I've applied for 1,000 jobs and I've gotten 0 callbacks. That hurts. It hurts inside, because that's hard. But then I talked to him and I said, well, what are you doing? Are you, like Barnabas said, just clicking apply? Because I can click a button 30,000 times and get 0 results, but that's not effective, right? Are you willing to look at your approach and say, hey, that might not work? And I was in a meeting the other day, and it was about federal workforce in general. And this recruiter came up and said, it's 2025. The way the federal workforce worked in 2024 is different than how it's working today. We need to retrain candidates on how to be candidates. And I loved that line, because it's true. In this NatSec space, it's easy. You take your badge, your clearance, because we always wear badges, right? Not cool guy badges like sheriffs or anything, but like badges that have like your name and your picture on it and allow you into secure spaces, right? We would take those off, right? And then by the time we got home, we would have a job somewhere else. That's how many opportunities there were in this space. That's not the case right now, right? And so how do we retrain the workforce to recognize that they're going to have to do some of these things that Barnabas mentioned, the network. They're going to have to leverage your network. You're going to have to make sure that you make these phone calls. It's not about just sitting and fly. It's about tailoring your resume. It's about investing in that network ahead of time. It's about asking those people that in your network for referrals. It's about asking, once you've applied, hey, do you mind? And that's how I like to frame it, right? When I was at Microsoft, and I'll close on this point, I had people all the time tell me I want to work at Microsoft. And I'd say, okay, what do you want to do? Well, I just want to work at Microsoft. Okay, fine. When was the last time you were on our careers page? 6 months ago. I said, okay, listen, with all due respect, and I don't mean that in the way that people say it before they say something offensive. I mean legitimately, because I try to approach this with love and kindness and respect towards all. If you want a job at Microsoft, you're going to have to be, and I'm not telling you, I'm not going to dictate to anybody. I very rarely use the word should. I'm going to tell someone, though, you should probably experience the Microsoft Careers page more often than once every 6 months if you want a job there. And leave it at that. You determine what the frequency is. And that could be how bad. And somebody's like, well, I'm going to check it every day then. Well, I don't know if that's necessary. Maybe not every day, because that's a lot, right? If you think about all the things that we have to do on a daily basis, it might be a lot to add that to it. But if you're serious about it, you should check it more often than once every 6 months. And so there's a spectrum there, right? Once a day, versus once every 6 months. Somewhere in between there is the sweet spot, right? I check the Microsoft Careers page as a Microsoft alum once every 1 to 2 weeks, because I'm looking specifically in the cleared space. But then I also reach out to my Microsoft network, other parts of the network that weren't necessarily in the Fed sector, to see what opportunities they're seeing of. A CCM friend of mine who worked in the PubSec space actually pinged me the other day. He said, "Hey, there's a new opening in my team. Let's connect. Let's catch up." So I said, I explained, the situation, and I said, "Hey, I'd love to have coffee, and I'd love to have your support, but there are no guarantees. But I have someone who's been a part of my network, who saw what I did at Microsoft, appreciated what I did at Microsoft, now wants me to come back, and maybe there is that opportunity to boomerang back." Go back out into the wild for 7 months and then come back. Who knows? But I think it is one of those things that the military did definitely teach me how to get kicked, how to get beat down, how to lose, how to fail. I picked myself up. I'm bruised. I'm battered. I'm no worse for the wear, I guess. But to keep at it with that fight. I'd love to hear from you, Barnabas. What's the thing that the military that you brought with you, if you had to pick one thing that it kept you going?
The biggest thing that resonates with me is mission versus profit. That's something that I struggled with, still continue to struggle with, right? Because growing up in the military, all the things that you talked about, Jonathan, resonates with a lot of people in the military, because it's all about mission. It's all about the water, the desert. All of those things are about mission. It's never in your mind does it come across that you say, well, I'll go do that if you're going to pay me money, right? If you're going to give me a bonus, if you're going to do those things, or if I have to make the military, if I have to make the Army some money doing that, then I'll do it, right? If it makes the Army money, the mentality of, I often sit back and think how different my life would be had I never gone into the military coming out of college, right? Had I just gone into Microsoft and say, oh, now I'm growing up in a for-profit culture, right? Versus growing up in a mission culture, because those are very different things. And the ability to think about something from the perspective of saying, I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. I'm doing it because I think it's the thing that we need to do to grow and to continue to be successful. As when I leave, right? It's not about me. It's about leaving something for the people behind me that's coming to make sure that they understand. And when I'm dealing with the other troops and the other people that I work with, instilling in them the right values and the things that you want to go. Everybody remembers the mission, right? So all of those things, but whatever your branch is, you remember what those things are. Well, when you get to your company, the company has a mission too, but yeah, it's on the back of your badge if you look for it, but nobody really remembers that mission. Nobody thinks about it in that context. What they think about is, okay, when is our next announcement for profit results for the quarter? Right? What have we done to be successful as a company? And sometimes you start to realize that, again, I know this is a recorded call, but I know I'm not telling anything that anybody doesn't already know. There are things that people do, things that companies do that aren't necessarily as ethical or as forward thinking as they should be, because what they're thinking about is this profit number. What are the things that I need to tell to these shareholders to make them excited about where we're going and what we're continuing to do? So for me, that transition has been trying to really figure out, battling with how do you continue to have your mindset, understanding that, yes, I work for this for-profit company, and I need to understand that my responsibility is to turn a profit, is to make us profitable. But I still have to do that in a way that aligns with my morals and my values as it relates to mission first, right? Because ultimately, if I'm supporting public sector, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, then I understand ultimately that that's a mission. And I see now how they get caught up in these things of continuing to spend money when nothing's ever really going to happen, because I know I'm sitting in a place that I see those things happen, right? And I see how companies can trap them into doing those things. So what is my responsibility into making that happen? How do I start to get my mindset right to where I can look at myself in the mirror every day and say, you know what, did I do what I was supposed to do today as it relates to my values and my morals? Yes, I did. Now, sometimes that comes with a price. Sometimes, you miss out on things. Sometimes you miss out on opportunities. And for everybody, that's going to be different. The question was what resonates with me and what are the things? And that's the biggest thing for me is mission versus profit. And continuing to kind of hold true to what I was raised in and understanding that the mission is always the mission. And it's always going to be about giving back. It's always going to be about helping people up the ladder. If I'm there, it's always going to be about going back and grabbing those folks that we may have left behind, right? Because we don't leave anybody behind. So it's not about me achieving and doing those great things that shine the light on me. It's about me making sure that my entire team gets the light shine on them, right? And I'm in the background as far as those things that are happening. So that's the part that I continue to try to keep at the forefront of my brain and make sure that I have an understanding of that's critical to me and something that I want to pass along to my team understands that that's the way that we operate. Nobody left behind.
That teamwork thing is really interesting too. And I mean, I got laid off in January, right? And I had honestly checked my Microsoft stock. And it was always funny for those of us who've been at Microsoft. The number of financial advisors that will reach out to you on a daily, weekly basis thinking, and I would tell people just straight up, I said, listen, I know you, don't get me wrong. Like I made a nice living. I enjoyed my life. I was rewarded handsomely with stock benefits and other types of benefits. But I would tell people straight up, I was like, look, you think I'm making that Satya money? I'm not. Like I'm making decent money, but I'm not making Satya money. And I live in an expensive area, right? So it was a nice way to politely brush off the financial advisors. Because I mean, legitimately, once a week I'd have somebody being like, hey, I can help your money grow and I could turn you into a billionaire. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be a billionaire. I just that's not of interest to me. But one of the things that profit thing that it's always hard, getting laid off in January, right? Like that hurts, right? It was hard. I didn't look at my stock portfolio, the Microsoft specific aspect of my stock portfolio for probably 6 months. I checked it the other day and I was like, hey, you know what? They made some better numbers because they laid off a whole buttload of people. And so it's like my stock went up a little bit. I'm like, hey, it's hard and I have a job, but it's like my Microsoft stock's doing pretty good. So I'm grateful to have that, right? Because honestly, like I'm gonna be living on that for a little while I'm gonna maybe cash in a share here or there and make sure that my bills stay paid. But the point is that I had prepped for a rainy day. I'd saved for a rainy day. I'd prepared for this because I knew the volatility of contracting space in general. The defense contracting space is hugely volatile, but I feel like IT is even more so. And so when you mix these sort of two very volatile chemicals of the IT industry and the defense contracting space, and you mix those together, of course, you're going to have a little volatility. And I'm not trying to discourage people from going into this space. If you want to work for a company like Microsoft, they're doing amazing things in the federal sector, right? In helping our government modernize. I mean, some days, like I would have a conversation to explain to somebody why Post-it notes aren't a good idea, right? And now we should use collaborative platforms to share. And we have this thing called Teams, right? And I don't like Teams. I like Post-it notes or, whatever project, whatever it may be, right? But they're doing some really amazing work. A lot of it's AI focused. But I think that profitability thing was always something that I still struggle with because, when I think about the team, I think about the goods of the team, making sure that the team leaving no person behind. Sometimes, there aren't people, and this isn't, there are people in the military who it's hard to say this because people who've never served don't understand it. There are people I served with who I did not trust, who I did not believe would do the right thing when it came down to it, because I saw what they did in front of me when it came to doing the right thing. I saw them not do the right thing. Earlier, Barnabas talked about being in having a good relationship with supply. I legit watched supply not give people things that they need because they didn't like them. And I was like, but that's part of the game, right? It's part of like, you ask somebody to do something and it's like, you want to be like, this is your function, right? This is your job. This is what you were made to do. And they're like, nope, I'm not going to do it because I just don't like you. And I'm like, it's hard to hear those things, but that's the reality of the world, right? And when you think about teams and in the military, there were people on my team who were not, they may have not been great at some things. They might not have been great at PT, but they were good at what they did as analysts, right? But I would hope that I sort of instilled in them this work ethic and this sort of feeling of like not leaving any teammates behind. But there are definitely some teammates who I wouldn't like we use weapons, and this is the first example that came to mind, right? there are some of my teammates that I wouldn't have walked down range in front of in a target range, and had them armed behind me, because I'd be like, hey, look, I'm not willing to trust you to that level. There's different levels of trust with people, right? So I think it's one of those things that it is hard when you transition from the, and again, this is whether you do 5 years or 25 years. Civilian corporations, companies out here in the civilian world are for-profit enterprises. And I'll keep this as apolitical as possible. One of my big issues with Doge was they were people who didn't really understand how government functions, trying to come in and make it more efficient. And they were like, well, our government needs to be profitable. Our government needs to be leaner, more efficient. I'm not saying there isn't fraud, waste, and abuse, but the Army is not meant to turn a profit, right? The Army is not meant to be the most efficient means of spending money, or of doing things. And we've failed at a lot of things while we're testing and trying things, right? That's part of what it is to be in government versus, and that's what the military is. It is a function of an arm of the government, versus being in the civilian world where you try something and it fails, and then you have to divest yourself of that investment. Employees, that's 100% how people get laid off. And people sometimes don't like when you say this, but you're an investment. That company is investing in you. They're purchasing your time and energy and effort and your network and all the potential. They're buying your potential. If that doesn't return the investment that they need, they're going to divest themselves of that investment. And it sounds cruel when you're talking about a human being in that way, but that is 100% what that company is doing. They're paying you and they're investing in your potential. And they're wanting a return on that investment. A company pays you, let's use nice round numbers, right? Company pays you $100,000. They're expecting $150,000 or $200,000 or $250,000 worth of value that you're going to bring to that company. And if that company looks at you and says, you're not, whatever that number is, you're not bringing that value to me, they will divest themselves. And that's a 100% what the layoff is that company is figuring out. And sometimes it's just, the company is no longer willing to invest in that particular area. So I think one of the things why I'm bringing all that up is, as hard as it is to say, I had one job when I got laid off from Microsoft, and that was at Microsoft. And so then all of a sudden I left this meeting, this business update meeting, and I didn't have a job anymore. And that hurt, right? Personally, it hurt me personally. I felt that. But I try not to I tell people, hey, try as little as possible to take it personally, because companies are going to lay off people, right? Companies are going to come and go in your life. It is not uncommon for a person to have been laid off once or twice or three times. I coached somebody recently, and they were like, it was the second time they got laid off at Microsoft. And honestly, for me, I don't know how I have the ability to trust someone multiple times like that, right? Like, I'm willing to come back right now as a boomerang, and I'm happy if Microsoft tomorrow picks me back up and says, hey, here's a badge, you're Microsofty again. I'll take it, right? But if they lay me off again, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I don't know that I would trust them again. I'd be like, hey, look, the world is big. There are a lot of, it's a relationship thing, right? Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on me again, right? Sort of thing. I don't know that I would do that. But that is one of those things that it's hard, because we only have one job at a time, and it's our livelihood. It's a lot of, like I said earlier, how we see ourselves in society. And we don't have a job. What are we doing, right? What does that mean? How is it impacting our ability to care for our family? How is that impacting our ability to provide for ourselves? It is tough, but I say, that's where I go back to that military thing. I pick yourself up, dust yourself off, wash your face off, go back at it, right? Fill up your coffee cup and go back for more.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jonathan and Dr. Barnabas. And again, I just want to bring the folks who are listening to the chat here. If you guys have questions, I know again this is we're just discussing about veterans transitioning to civilians, but it's almost the same of any person who's transitioning from any role to a new role, or even from a company to a company. It comes with its own barriers, mindset, and failures and learnings, and so many things. So again, that's where I want you guys to come from that angle, and take this as a pivoting exercise of how do you really face new things in life, and that we face every day. Every day is different, and transitioning is definitely one of the tougher things. So if there is no questions from the folks on the chat, I would maybe ask again, Dr. Barnabas and Jonathan, maybe to share the top three learnings that you think helped you a lot during your transition. Again, from mindset, from communications, from leadership. What were the top three things that you think, oh my God, those helped me a lot transitioning and made me feel like I belong here, made me feel like I can fit here, I can grow here. Because again, it's a mental thing too. Most people, when they transition, sometimes you feel like, oh, I don't belong here. This is not for me. This is might not be the space that I want to be. It's a comfort zone again. We all sometimes live in our comfort zone for a long period of time, and we want to stay there if we can. If we cannot, then we feel unsafe. So I'll pause here. I'll pass it on to Dr. Barnabas, and then Jonathan. What are the top three learnings that helped you move from military to civilian?
My top three would be listening, watching, and continuously learning.
I love it. I love it. Jonathan?
I think that I'm a big fan of the saying, fail to plan, plan to fail, because I think that having a plan, being able to adapt is hugely important. And I think just don't quit. I think those are the things that I really, and again, I put in the chat, the things that we learn in transitioning from the military to civilian world absolutely 100% apply. And that's what's so much fun about coaching in this space and having the opportunity to share the stage, with another veteran talking about transition. But even if I had never served, if somebody came on looking at this recording and is like, hey, I'm struggling in the job search. Okay, make a plan, right? Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? Barnabas shared earlier, you want to work at Microsoft. Okay, where do you want to work at Microsoft? You give a person, company, a role, and then start working from there. But then, when you get kicked down, when you get the 30,000th rejection, continue to do it, or look at your approach. If you're just blindly applying for everything and you're not getting any sort of good feedback, positive feedback, there might be something there. That self-reflection is hugely important. But this has been a great opportunity to spend some time, sharing some of the experiences I've had, as a job seeker with fellow job seekers. Hopefully it's been worthwhile and productive, and hopefully the folks who are watching the recording can glean some wisdom, can learn from some of my mistakes, because I certainly have learned a lot along the way.
Amazing. Again, I'm gonna see if there's any question in the chat. Okay, nothing there. So let me maybe ask you again, and we have like maybe 3 minutes, and this could be a quick one. What would you think is the biggest challenge from transitioning? What is the number one thing that most people transition has as a barrier during the time that you transitioned? Dr. Barnabas.
Not necessarily a barrier, but one of the mistakes I see people make is rushing and taking the first thing, feeling like, the first offer that they get is the offer that they're going to take. And that may or may not work out for you, to be quite honest. So it's back to the failing to plan and planning to fail, right? Is making sure that as you start to make the transition, that you're thinking about all those things ahead of time. What is it that I want to do? Where is it that I want to be? So when the opportunity arises, you can take advantage of it. Or when opportunities arise that that's not what you want to be a part of, you're have the wherewithal to say, nope, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to continue to look. So, hopefully not putting yourself in a situation where you have to take the first thing out. If you do, that's fine. I mean, everybody's been there and everybody's done that. If you take the first thing and you figure out, okay, this is not what I need to do, then start working on where you want to go and what you want to do while you have that particular role. I'll just say it's harder to look for a job when you don't have a job. When you have a job than it is when you don't have a job, right? Because you're trying to work and then come and do it in the evenings or whatever. So that would be my response to that.
Amazing. I love, again, rushing is definitely a big one that everybody's facing today. And again, I think this is a great wisdom. Thank you so much, Dr. Barnes. Jonathan, what is yours?
Yeah, I think I would go back to the plan thing and the idea that I shared. I was volunteering with a bunch of Marines, and this Marine, I was talking to him about what I do, and I coach in the transition space. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm getting out in 6 months." I was like, "Okay, great. Do you have a plan?" And he's like, "Well, I'm married to a fellow Marine." I said, I explained to him very gently. I was like, "Your marriage." He was an E3, right? For the enlisted ranks, they go E1 to E9. E9 being the highest, E3 being pretty low. I was an E3 when I joined the Army. I got out as an E6, right? It's one of those things, and I explained to him. I said, "That's wonderful." I said, "Congratulations on your marriage." That marriage is a legal status, right? That is that is not a plan. That is because I don't know what will happen in that transition. I have no idea. But to fall back on, it's great, but it's sort of an enlisted mindset, right? This sort of thing, like, oh, I'm married, I'll be fine, I'll become a dependent. I'm like, that's not a plan. Like, so I gave my contact information. I said, look, I do resume reviews, I do interview prep. I want to make sure that you understand. I think that planning is hugely important, and I love the point about rushing too. Everything takes the time it takes, and it is frustrating because it is a core part of our identity, right? But I don't like double negatives, but I'm not a veteran, or I'm not a part of the military because I was once. Like I will always have that status. I will always, but I had to change, right? And it was a pretty drastic and abrupt change to go from serving. I was serving in Iraq at the time when I started transition because they had lifted stop loss and they no longer needed me in the Army anymore. And so they gave me a choice. They said, you can re-enlist and stay here right now, or you can get out and go home. But if you were getting out and going home, we're putting you on a plane in a week and you're going home. And so it was hard. It was a hard transition. But I think that the identity, and that loss of community, there's a lot of pieces to it. But I think planning, all the places where I've done poorly in life, a lot have been as a result of not planning. So I always talk about planning when it comes to the job search, and focusing on what you're looking for. Somebody says, I want a job at Microsoft. Well, we have 200,000 jobs here. What is it that you're looking to do? You got to come with some of these answers. You got to think about that. Some of that introspection and self-reflection is important to be able to come up with good answers to that.
Amazing. I love it. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Barnabas, Jonathan, for being vulnerable, being open, being transparent, sharing your wisdom. Again, this is not only about military again to civilian. It's about pivoting, about real stories from life that helps anyone who will listen to this recording in the future to get some wisdom and understand how to move on. Again, this is what life is. It's all about changes and all about struggles and challenges that we face every day, whether it's in workplace, whether it's in life and family, or anything. How can you adapt? How can you make that move and live the next life, or the future space that you want to be in? So again, thank you so much, Dr. Barnabas. Jonathan, any final words before I wrap it up for today?
For me.
No, sir. I'm good. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today, and looking forward to having you in the job fair this Wednesday, noon time Eastern, August 27th. There will be a ton of recruiters and leaders from Microsoft, from other locations or other companies that will be joining us. So stay tuned, and looking forward to having you there. Enjoy the rest of the Sunday. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, you soon.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.